flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor. Trustee Cusimano?
Trustee Cusimano appearing remotely from Macomb Township, Michigan, Macomb County, State of Michigan.
Thank you. Trustee Lucido?
Trustee Lucido remotely from Macomb Township in Macomb County, State of Michigan.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver?
Trustee Oliver remotely from Macomb Township, Macomb County, Michigan.
Trustee Nevers?
Yes, Nancy Nevers, remotely from Macomb Township, the County of Macomb, and the State of Michigan.
Thank you. Treasurer Drollet?
Drollet present from Macomb Township, Macomb County, State of Michigan.
Clerk Posey, remote from Macomb Township, Macomb County, State of Michigan. And Supervisor Viviano?
Supervisor Viviano is present from Macomb Township, the County of Macomb, the State of Michigan.
All members are present.
Moving on to approval of the agenda. Clerk Posey, are there any additions, deletions, or corrections?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There's one amendment to the agenda which includes an add-on. Item number 6, it's a request to establish amount of guarantee for completion of site improvements at 10% of the cost estimate for site improvements as approved by the township engineer, and to reduce guarantees for completion of site improvements currently being held to 10%. And then proposed add-on 6A, request to amend the Macomb Township Code of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Division 2, Section 14 through 83, guarantees for completion of site improvements. And that's all the amendments I have this evening.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as corrected?
So moved.
Amended.
Support.
Any discussion? Hearing none, there is a motion by Trustee Oliver, supported by Trustee Nevers, to approve the agenda as amended. Clerk Posey, will you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Trustee Oliver?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
Yes,
Trustee Cusimano?
Yes,
Trustee Lucido?
Yes.
Trustee Drollet, or Treasurer Drollet?
Yes,
Clerk Posey, yes. And Supervisor Viviano?
Yes, motion carries. Moving on to approval of the bills. Is there a motion to approve the bill run?
move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill run? Hearing none, there is a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Clerk Posey, to approve the bill run. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Treasurer Drollet?
Yes,
Clerk Posey, yes. Trustee Cusimano?
yes,
Trustee Lucido?
Yes.
Trustee Oliver?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
yes,
And Supervisor Viviano?
Yes, motion carries. Approval of the previous meeting minutes from February 10th, 2021.
Motion to approve the previous meeting minutes from February 10th, 2021.
Support. Any discussion? Hearing none, there's a motion by Clerk Posey, supported by Treasurer Gillette, to approve the previous meeting minutes. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Clerk Posey, yes. Treasurer Drollet?
yes,
Trustee Cusimano?
yes,
Trustee Lucido?
Yes.
Trustee Oliver?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
yes,
And Supervisor Viviano?
Yes, motion carries. Moving on to the consent items.
move the entirety.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question on the pathway gap closure easement agreements. Is there someone who could speak to whether or not there was damage to the septic fields, or am I reading it wrong? And is there any provision for contractors to have insurance to cover such casualties?
Van Tifflin, can you field that question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The easement that is in front of you is for a project that has not started yet. That provision in the easement agreement would just ensures that the property owner's septic field would be put back if indeed the contractor damages it. That'll be part of the specifications when this project goes out to bid later on in the year.
So the amounts allocated for the septic field damage may or may not come from the general budget. Is that what I'm understanding?
if the contractor damaged the septic field, they would be responsible for fixing the septic field. That provision was put in there at the request of the homeowner so that they were assured that any damage to their septic field was taken care of by the township contractor. It made them feel better signing the easement document.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tiffelen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my questions.
Trustee Kuzma, are there any other discussion on the consent items? Hearing none. Treasurer Gillette, supported by Clerk Posey, to approve the consent items. Clerk Posey, we call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Treasurer Drollet,
Yes.
Clerk Posey, yes. Trustee Kuzma,
Yes.
Trustee Lucido,
Yes.
Trustee Oliver,
Yes.
Trustee Nevers,
Yes.
Supervisor Viviano.
Yes, that motion carries. Morning, on to item 6, the amended item.
Public comment, Mr. Chairman.
Public comment. Apologies. All right. On to public comment. Mr. Ivanowski, will you please open the floor for the general public? Will you please remember that there are a limit of 3 minutes for public comment?
Yes, if you're using a telephone, please press *9 to raise your hand, or if you're on a PC, just click the raise hand button, and I will allow you to speak. Mr. Chairman, I don't see anybody willing to speak at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ivanowski. Seeing that there's no one wishing to speak tonight, we will close public comment. And now we will move on to item 6.
Mr. Chairman, I move to establish amount of guarantee for completion of site improvements at 10% of the cost estimate for site improvements as approved by the township engineer, and to reduce guarantees for completion of site improvements currently being held at 10%.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Actually, Mr. Van Tiffelen, can you give us some background, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, board members. Currently, the township requires that a developer building a private development in the township supply the township with a site development bond in the amount of 100% of the construction cost as approved by my office. This in theory would guarantee that if the developer did not complete the improvements, that the township would have the funds available to complete the improvements. However, in reality, the township is not a developer and probably would not be in a position where they would need to complete those developments. We have other safeguards that prevent lots from being sold from businesses that would move into a plaza, for example, that would put them in harm's way. So we normally, in most cases, would not be in a position where we'd have to use that money. I've been working with the township for over 20 years, and we've taken one bond, and that was for some landscaping that wasn't installed by a developer, and we had to help the homeowners out. But in most cases, we have other safeguards that would put us in a position where the only party that would be harmed would be the developer, because they wouldn't be able to complete their development and get tenants in their building or have building permits issued. So because this 100% becomes an issue for the developers and is an issue, honestly, with staff trying to get inspections done, get these things on the township board agenda or the board's release, we're requesting that we simply go down to 10%. 10% was arrived at based on the current policy that was established by the previous township board. The board allows for 90% to be a performance bond, which is essentially an insurance policy, with the remainder being in the form of a cash or a bank letter of credit. So the performance bond, although it's a guarantee, it's much more difficult to get our hands on if we needed to get in there. This wouldn't apply necessarily to improvements that the developer is obligated to, such as road improvements or water main improvements. Those could be handled separately. This is for the work that would be done within the development. So we are recommending that the township board adopt this 10% as the rule going forward. And also any bonds that we're currently holding at the township for projects that have given us a bond to this point, all be reduced down to the 10% that we're asking the board to have as a policy going forward. Do you have any answer any questions?
Mr. Van Tiffel, I have a couple of questions just so that the residents who are listening are clearly understand. The bonding at 100%, whether it's through a bond, bank letter of credit, or all cash. My understanding is that ties up effectively twice the amount of resources it takes to develop any project in our township.
Yeah, that is correct, because essentially what's going on is the developer, let's say it's $1 million project. They have to post $1 million with us, and then they have to pay their contractors to get to put the pipe in the ground, put the roads in, parking lot, and so on. And it does take time for the township to process a bond release, depending on when board meetings are and when the inspections can be done and what the weather is like. That process might take a month or two by the time we get the request from the developer and we can get it before the township board and the check is issued by the treasurer's office.
And that one consequence of that of bonding at 100% is that really only the very well-funded largest developers are able to do projects in our township, correct?
That's what we're being told by the development community, and I would agree with that. That you know, a lot of developers don't have the ability to obtain performance bonds, so they're stuck giving us a bank letter of credit or cash, which means that they have to outlay all of that right up front. In the past, a lot of developers partnered up with the landowner, and the landowner essentially acted as the bank and helped them bankroll some of this. And none of that can be done. The developer has to have the wherewithal at this point to put all the money up right up front.
I don't have any further questions. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Van Tiffelen on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions. Since it is an amendment to a ordinance which has been in effect since 1974, I think it's appropriate to spend some time so that the residents understand what's going on. I have the questions to Mr. Van Tiffelen, and in all full disclosure, I spoke with Mr. Van Tiffelen and covered a lot of these questions in a previous conversation a few days ago. One of the questions I had that I think residents would ask is, how is the requirement for a performance bond, and I'm quoting, unnecessarily burdensome to Macomb Township to manage? Could you give me some examples?
Yes, currently the way it works is as construction progresses on the site, the developer would turn in a request for the bond to be released. So each department that would have jurisdiction would have to send an inspector out to the site to take a look at what has been done, inventory everything that's been done. That comes back into engineering. Then engineering determines what percentage of the overall bond can be released by the township board. And then that needs to be put before the township board at a meeting. And typically it's been done more recently as part of the consent agenda. But there's a lot of work that we do from a staff standpoint that, you know, in order to get that bond released to a point where the township board can approve it. And that's what I'm referring to in my memo. And it really is for something that is not, there's very little chance that we would ever need to use it. So it's a risk reward thing as far as we're concerned.
Well, other than the amounts, how is a 10% bond or irrevocable letter of credit or surety less burdensome to manage than a 25%, a 40%, or a 50%?
The amendment to the ordinance that the board will be addressing next actually has a provision in it that 10% will be held until all of the construction work is complete. So theoretically, if the developer is accurate in when they give us the bond release, there's one inspection that's made, we make sure that everything is completed, and then we can administratively approve the bond to be released, and then building permits can be issued and occupancy can be granted.
And I understand from my conversations with you and that Mr. Tomlinson had inserted a provision in the amended ordinance which indicates that the township shall retain full guarantee during the duration of the project and release the guarantee upon completion of the site improvements. This is the part. Occupancy permits shall not be issued until all site improvements are complete and the bond is released for site plans. That's the safety provision that, well, I'm going to skip down to the questions that I have is why do we have bonds at all, even at a 10% amount? Why not eliminate the bond altogether? If you have the security of the withholding of the occupancy permits, why not, as I understand it, the developers have a problem with the sureties because of the premium or the bonus or the rate that they charge for the irrevocable letter of credit or the surety bond or the in the event that they want to self-fund, they have to post cash and they don't return. You get a return on a rate of interest on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm sure there are a number of reasons, but the reason that we would want to keep some money is because we want to have something available to us if the site goes bankrupt, let's say, in the middle of construction. And we have, let's say open excavations, we have piles of dirt, we have pipe, and it's a unsightly, unsafe situation that I could come to the township board, ask for permission to take that money after giving the property owner notice. I could take the money, hire a contractor, make the site safe, and then return whatever the balance is to the contractor or the developer.
My point is, if they have a problem with the bankers or the surety bondsman or the posting cash up front, it's impeding their cash flow and their ability to develop more properties. That's the vibe I'm getting, is that's the problem that the developers have with putting so much resource into the performance bond. Is that
essentially? Yes, they have responsibilities to their contractors to pay the contractors as the work is completed. And a lot of times the contractors aren't getting paid or they're using other money to pay the contractor while they're waiting for the township to return the money. And I think that's the biggest issue. But as an earlier question, outlined, we are in some cases limiting the number of developers who can actually afford to give us that money up front. And so there's a couple of aspects here that are causing the issue.
Well, what is the premium that they have to pay to the bondsman or to the surety or to the bank? Is it 10%, 5%, 30%? Does anyone on the board know, or do you know from experience what that?
Mr. Cusmano, Mr. Chairman, my experience is it's 1% of the bond cost.
Mr. Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Tomlinson.
And I do concur with Mr. Van Tifflin. It is, we're reducing it to 10%, quite frankly, to try to be a little bit more reasonable with their developers with this and to eliminate some of the hurdles that the small developer may have in trying to be involved here.
I did some research and I looked at Canton Township's current ordinance, Clinton Township's current ordinance, and Washington Township, and it seems to read as our ordinance currently reads in those particular municipalities. Is there anyone who has a 10% cap in their ordinance that you're aware of, Mr. Tomlinson?
Every community is different, Trustee Cusmano. I will say this. I would not leave the amount to the discretion of an employee or the board, from the standpoint that I think you need to have some concurrence from the board as to what that set amount would be. Obviously, if the 10% doesn't seem to be working for us, we will revisit this issue. But there's a reason we didn't put it in the ordinance. And originally we had proposed that, and it's to give us some adaptability and flexibility in the event we want to make a change going forward. And I know Mr. Van Tiffelen would agree with me that he doesn't want to be in a position where he's calling the amount of the bond. And that's why we're coming with a hard and fast number as far as our policy.
And is it in your legal opinion that it would limit the recourse of the township at all, having a performance bond in place or a revocable letter of credit or guarantee, versus what's the difference between having it in place at 100%? And in other words, is there any downside or pitfall that could inure to the detriment of the township should there be another housing crash?
Well, I think Mr. Van Tiffelen hit the nail on the head. It really is to put us in a position to eliminate any what we would deem as being a nuisance or an attractive nuisance. And we're not in the development business. We're not going to start putting roads in if they fail to comply with their site plan. So I guess that's the negative from the standpoint of whether or not we really want to be in a position that we want to become developers of property in the event something happens with the market. But it protects us from making sure that a development that may not be completed to its site plan approval gives us the opportunity to go in there and recover on the bond to make sure that things are safe and that they don't affect neighboring properties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes. I'm sorry, does someone have anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that. Back in 2007, 2008, 2009, when the economy went down, we had a number of developers go bankrupt. The township didn't recall any of the site development bonds that we had at that point because we deemed the projects at that point safe enough that we didn't have to take any of the bonds. We didn't take any of the bonds to complete any of the improvements. So, I think that was a pretty good example of what we would be worst case scenario. And I think 10% would have been enough back then, had we had this proposed policy in place.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tiffelen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman. Is there anybody else that has any discussion on item 6? Okay, hearing none. We have a motion from Treasurer Gillette, supported by Clerk Posey, to summarize, set the request for guaranteed completion of site improvements at 10% and of the estimated costs, and to reduce the guarantees for completion of site improvements currently being held to 10%. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Treasurer Drollet?
Yes.
Clerk Posey, yes. Trustee Cusumano?
No.
Trustee Lucido?
Yes.
Trustee Oliver?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
yes,
Supervisor Viviano?
Yes, the motion carries. Now we're moving on to 6A, which is the actual ordinance amendment. Is there a motion?
Motion to request to amend the Macomb Township Code of Ordinance, Chapter 14, Division 2, Section 14 through 83, guarantees for completion of site improvement.
Support.
Van Tiffelen, can you give us we covered most of it already, but can you give us a brief background on this portion of it?
Yes, with the 10% established in a separate motion, essentially what this ordinance amendment does is allows us to release that 10% administratively with departmental approval. So that will cut down the amount of time that it takes to turn these around. It also nails down that occupancies will not be issued in a site development situation or building permits in a site condominium or subdivision construction development. But, and I think Mr. Tomlinson added some language in there with regard to recouping legal fees if that's necessary as part of enforcement.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none, there is a motion by Clerk Posey, supported by Treasurer Gillette, to amend our Code of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Division 2, Section 14-83. Clerk Posey, will you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Clerk Posey, yes. Treasurer Drollet,
Yes.
Trustee Kuzma,
No.
Trustee Lucido,
Yes.
Trustee Oliver,
Yes.
Trustee Nevers,
Yes.
Supervisor Viviano.
Yes, motion carries. Moving on to item 7, we have a request to approve the pathway advance for 24280 24 Mile Road, parcel number 08-13-200-022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Before you go any further, I have a conflict on that item. I'm recluse myself from voting.
thank you, Trustee Oliver. Mr. Van Tifflin, can you give some background?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, board members. This particular property is into the Township Assessing Department right now for a parcel split in combination. Typically, that would require them to build the pathway along the major road frontage, in this case, 24 Mile Road. However, in that area of 24 Mile Road, there are no sidewalks within a mile or two, at least, of the property. And it wouldn't make sense to build the sidewalk or pathway at this point. So the property owner is requesting that it be put into abeyance with the understanding in the agreement that once the township deems it necessary for it to go in, they'll have to install it at their own expense at a later date. We've reviewed the request and are recommending approval.
Van Tifflin, is there any discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion by Clerk Posey, supported by Treasurer Gillette, to approve the advance for 24280 24 Mile Road, parcel ID 08-13-200-022. Clerk Posey, will you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Clerk Posey, yes. Treasurer Drollet,
Yes.
Trustee Kuzma,
Yes.
Trustee Lucido,
Yes.
Trustee Oliver has recused himself, Trustee Nevers,
Yes.
and Supervisor Viviano.
Yes, that motion carries. Item 8 is a request to approve the release of an easement for municipal utilities for Elite Corporate Park. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Van Tifflin, background, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, board members. This particular easement that we're recommending to be released was recorded with the county with some errors in it. That was discovered after it was recorded. We have since obtained the corrected easement that has now been recorded. So we're in a position where the original easement can be vacated, essentially, or released, so that the record is clean for this particular development. We reviewed it and we're recommending approval.
Mr. Van Tifflin, if there is any discussion or questions?
Mr. Chairman, question for Mr. Van Tifflin. Was it just human error? What was the reason for the incorrect easement being filed?
The easement document that was submitted and recorded had an off-site area. So essentially, the property owner was trying to dedicate an easement for a property that they did not own. So once it was discovered, we had them come back and revise the easement to eliminate that off-site section so that the signature was valid for the easement.
We did not incur any unnecessary attorney's fees as a result of that correction. Is that
No, the
right?
developer had to pay for their engineer to redraw the easement document, and they had to have the easement recorded at their own expense. They will be given this release for them to record this as well at their own expense.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my questions.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion by Clerk Posey, supported by Trustee Oliver, to approve the easement for Elite Corporate, or the release of the easement for Elite Corporate Park. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Clerk Posey, yes. Trustee Oliver,
Yes.
Cousino,
Yes.
trustee Lucido,
Yes.
trustee Nevers,
Yes.
treasurer Drollet,
Yes.
and supervisor Viviano.
Yes, that motion carries. Moving on to item 9, in the Resources Department. We have an authorization to extend an offer of employment in the Planning Department. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Tabaka, can you please give us some background, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. I'm here tonight to request authorization to extend an offer of employment to Melissa Kelnowski for the Plan Review Analyst position. The Board of Trustees authorized the HR department to recruit for this position back in November of 2020. This position was posted in compliance with AFSCME Local 1917 CBA agreement. We received 10 applicants and 5 were invited to interview. Josh Box and James Van Tifflin were part of the interview process. We are recommending Melissa Kelnowski for this position. Thank you for the consideration of the matter. If approved, this hire is contingent upon a successful completion of a post-offer pre-hire physical examination, drug and alcohol screening, background check, and psychological exam. We're targeting an effective date of on or after March 15th of 2021, and this is a budgeted position.
Thank you, Mr. Tabaka. Is there any discussions or questions this time? Okay, we have a motion on the floor from trustee Oliver, supported by trustee Nevers, to extend the offer of employment to Melissa Kelnowski, if I pronounced that right, to the planning department position. Clerk Posey, we will call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, trustee Oliver,
Yes.
trustee Nevers,
Yes.
trustee Cousino,
Yes.
Lucido,
Yes.
treasurer Drollet,
Yes.
clerk Posey, yes, supervisor Viviano.
Yes, that motion carries. Congratulations on your first board presentation, Mr. Tabaka, and welcome.
Thank you, Chairman and board members.
Moving on to item 10, we're going to have a board of review appointment of, check my notes. For Phyllis Sharbo. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Just as a matter of background, one of our current Board of Review members, Karina Ball, resigned from the Board of Review because she had a previous commitment. At the same time, the Board of Review was set to meet for March. So she stepped down. Phyllis Sharbo, who was our assessor, previous assessor, is willing to step in and take on that duty. We appreciate that very much. If there's no more discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to confirm that Ms. Sharbo is a resident of Macomb Township. And I believe there may be a residency requirement as well. Is if someone
Are you available to answer that question, please?
I know she was a resident because I had some
Yes.
dealings with her back
You know where she lives?
5 or 10 years ago.
Because Madam Trustee Oliver is familiar with the candidate, and she lives on 22 Mile Road in Macomb Township.
Okay, I guess that'll be sufficient. Thank you, Trustee Oliver.
Seeing that there's no more discussion, there is a motion by Trustee Oliver, supported by Trustee Nevers. I believe that's who did it. To appoint Phyllis Sharbo to the Board of Review. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, trustee Oliver,
Yes.
trustee Nevers,
Yes.
trustee Cousino,
Yes.
trustee Lucido,
Yes.
treasurer Drollet,
Yes.
clerk Posey, yes, supervisor Viviano.
Yes, that motion carries. And lastly, it's item 11, to award the CDBG funds in the amount of
Chairman, I make the motion that we award the Community Development Block Grant Fund monies in the amount of $3,000 to Care House, $400 to Interfaith Caregivers, and the balance of $28,600 to Macomb Township Senior Center.
Thank you, Treasurer Drollet. Is there any support?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, there is a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Trustee Lucido, to award the CDBG monies. Clerk Posey, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Treasurer Drollet,
Yes.
Trustee Lucido,
Yes.
Trustee Kuzmano,
Yes.
Trustee Oliver,
Yes.
Trustee Nevers,
Yes.
Clerk Posey, yes, Supervisor Crebiano.
Yes, that motion carries. On to trustee comments.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you for the consideration of the $3,000 to Care House. They do an extraordinary job for the children in our township, and I'm very happy that we're able to give them that.
We're happy to do it. Thank you, Trustee Nevers. Trustee Lucido?
No comments from me tonight.
Trustee Kuzmano?
Nothing other than to confirm that while we were in between agenda items, I looked up Ms. Charbo on the BSA software online. It shows a residency on 24 Mile Road with 100% principal residency exemption since 1997. So I thank Trustee Oliver for providing that good information. I have no further comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Oliver?
One quick thing. Just want to thank Jim and Tiflin and that department and your department and Mr. Supervisor, and anyone that was involved in reducing that bond. I think the bigger picture that we're going to gain in the long run, we're going to get possibly now more of a variety of developers, which will come with more of a variety of style of houses and living quarters. And I think that's going to be a plus going forward for the township, because as Jim stated and others stated, that it kind of tied the hands of the smaller developer. And so this will really, I think it'll be helpful. I think it's a great thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Oliver.
That's it.
Treasurer's comments?
I'll just concur with, Trustee Oliver. There's 3 or 4 major building developers that can afford to post 100% bond, and all of them are good folks and good developers, but we don't want a community that has a monolithic look of just one giant Pulte subdivision, or pick a name. So I think this will offer more opportunities for folks to come and invest in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk's comments.
Again, not to repeat what everyone has said, but being a part of the previous administration, that has been an ongoing frustration for both the developers and the engineering department. I believe the progress that was made this evening will be tremendous moving forward in the development in our community and also in those departments. So I thank everybody that put in the time and effort to make that happen.
And lastly, I just want to congratulate Mr. Tabaka on his first week, and I want to point out to the residents, actually accomplished quite a bit in the last 2 weeks since we've made some of our decisions on hiring and placement. Mr. Tomlinson and Mr. Aloya have been diligently working away at our issues. And I'm looking forward to a lot more progress in the very near future. And lastly, I want to wish happy birthday to Trustee Lucido. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Clerk Posey, to adjourn. Clerk Posey, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Supervisor. Clerk Posey? Yes. Treasurer Drollet?
Yes.
Trustee Kuzmano?
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Oliver,
Yes.
Trustee Nevers,
Yes.
Supervisor Vivian.
Yes, that motion carries and this meeting is adjourned.